Welcome back, everybody, to another Pistons post-game reaction. This one carrying the same theme of a lot of the ones that we had. Very sad. The Pistons, I don't think they've played till like last Friday. So they've had, 5 days between games. And this is how they came out. This is how they looked. It's super disappointing that this is all that they were able to pull off. Before we get into the game, really quick, I am Ryan. I'm on the Sports Carnage podcast. It's presented by Detroit Sports Nation. Go ahead. We have a new one dropping tomorrow, probably. So take a minute to hit the link in the description. Go like our Facebook page, and then from there on, listen, follow, subscribe, rate, review, share, all of that. But now that we do got that out of the way, it's of course to talk about the abomination of the game that we've just watched. The most eye-popping stat that I think I've ever seen in the NBA is the Pistons were 8 of 38 in the second half. I don't understand how, as a professional basketball team and a collection of them, so not just one professional basketball player who we should all know how good a professional basketball player is. This is a whole team of them, a whole team of 15 professional basketball players, and they only managed to make 8 shots in what is essentially 24 minutes of basketball. Between the third and the fourth quarter, which is supposed to be crunch time. It's just so absurd when you look at it. Like in the NBA, if you have one quarter where you only score 16 points, then you're probably done for that game. In the entire second half, the Pistons only scored 34 points. They scored 16 in the third and then 18 in the fourth, which it never, ever in the entire history of basketball is that going to get it done now. Mike Sire says, I haven't seen Pistons games in 20 years. You should try it. I wish I could, Mike. I got too much skin in the game as far as the Pistons go. But besides their horrible shooting in the second half, the other thing that we kind of already mentioned is that they were coming off of a very nice rest. I don't think that the last game they played was against Charlotte, and that was the Malik Monk game. That was on Friday, I'm pretty sure. So they lost the game, of course, on Friday off the Malik Monk buzzer beater. And then they had Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So they had 4 days of rest, essentially, before they had to play on that 5th day. And this is how they came out. This is how they looked. Suffice to say that nobody really had a good game. Even Christian Wood, who was 5-9, if you watched him, particularly in the second half, he was 0 of 3 from 3, and none of those shots were even semi-close to falling. Blake really just hasn't looked the same since he's come back, and it's pretty obvious to tell that he's not 100%. He's still trying to play through, the injury that he does have, and at this point, he's just not being a positive force for the Pistons. Plus minus in this game, you can throw it out the window because the Pistons lost by 20 anyway. But Blake was minus 26, which was the second worst, only to Langston Galloway, who was minus 30 in a real kind of comeback to earth game from Langston, who's been playing, the best basketball definitely of his Pistons career. And then just some of the, just one of the better extended stretches that he's had in his career in general. But he got 40 minutes tonight. And again, minus 30 on the plus minus there. From Langston, 3-12 shooting, 3-10 from the three-point line. Even Andre Drummond, 3-10 field goals, 14 rebounds, which it kind of seems like that's a low now for him. Derrick Rose, he led the team in scoring, but he didn't have a particularly strong night. 5 of 11 from the field, 3 turnovers, only a couple of assists. So a bad game from everybody around. And it wasn't even just necessarily that the defense was falling apart. They really just couldn't hit a shot because Chicago didn't shoot. They shot way better than the Pistons, but they still didn't shoot all that well. Only 43% from the game. Where was kind of the difference is Chicago made 14 of 27 threes. And the Pistons were only at, 8 of 33. So Chicago hit more than 50% of their threes, and the Pistons weren't even able to hit a quarter of theirs. So that's where the big score discrepancy, kind of comes in. But Chicago, they also didn't shoot the ball from the free throw line well. So if you watch this whole game, God bless you. Albert Lewis has too many unnecessary shots, and they weren't even quality shots. a lot of the shots weren't quality shots, and even the quality shots that they were getting just weren't going in. You saw Luke Kennard miss a couple of shots where he was open, 4-15 of him on the night, 2 of 7 from 3. Again, it's not like Langston Galloway takes a ton of contested three-pointers. Most of them are kickouts where he's open, on the corner on the wing, and those are shots that just weren't falling today. Andre Drummond again, 3 of 10, Blake 4 of 15, Bruce Brown 1 of 6. One of the more interesting kind of notes from this game is it seemed like when everything was falling apart and the Pistons weren't playing well, some coaches might take it as a time to get some of their younger guys in and throw a guy like Christian Wood in there and get him 30 minutes in the night. Even a guy like Svi. But what Dwayne Casey did, I think, was really interesting, is all 5 of the starters played at least 30 minutes. Dre had 34, Langston had 40 minutes, and Luke had 38. And Blake, who's still, obviously trying to come back and monitor that injury a little bit, he got 30 minutes tonight, and Bruce Brown got 30 minutes tonight. And I understand that, if you thought you were going to make a comeback, that you need your best players on the court. But I don't know if Casey was trying to send a message of essentially, you guys have to play better by keeping them out on the court and essentially not bailing them out like so many veterans are used to in the NBA when your team's just getting waxed, right? Like Golden State lost by almost 50 tonight. They lost by 48. And I'd be very surprised if any of their starters were out there for even 30 minutes, 35. I can actually check that because I have the box scores right here. So just kind of see the juxtaposition between how many minutes those starters played. For Golden State, and again, they're a bit of a different story because, essentially their entire team is hurt, and now they have a team full of young guys, so it's a little bit different than what the Pistons have. But here, Pascal played 40 minutes for them so they had 2 starters and 3 players overall over 40 minutes, but they only had 8 players that were active for the game. So in that, it's not a good comparison because in that instance, everybody kind of does have to play. So not a good comparison. I'm sorry I didn't know their injury situation before I brought up their box score. But that's something that's interesting for me, at least. And the Pistons, they fall back to 4-10, which I think right now is like the second worst record in the Eastern Conference. But we know, with that being said, they're probably not any more than like two games out of the 8th spot in the East, because a lot of those teams are just kind of clumped out at between like 4 and 6 wins. Let me see if I can pull up the standings here. So the Pistons at 4-10. Yeah, they're 2 games behind Orlando, who's at 6-8. For the final spot in the Eastern Conference playoffs. And then obviously there's a ton of teams between 8 and 14 where the Pistons are. So they're still clumped together in that aspect. If you're worried about them making the playoffs, it's not time to panic. But if you're just watching it as a basketball fan and hoping that you could see the Pistons improve, then it might be a little bit more of the panic time. Only because through 14 games, right, this team is 4 wins. And if you think back of even just like the last 3 years, the Pistons were never, top 5 seed in the Eastern Conference, right? But they've always at least gotten off to a hot start and then kind of tailed away at the end, which allowed them to make the playoffs because they gave themselves such a big cushion up front. And this year, that is definitely not the case. It's going to be the exact opposite, where now they have to fight and claw their way back from this deficit that they made. Thankfully for them, none of the other teams in the East, at least where the Pistons would realistically be seated, aren't doing themselves any favors in pulling away. So we talked about Orlando at the 8th seed is only 2 games ahead of the Pistons, but that's the same for the Brooklyn Nets, who are in the 7th seed. So from 7 to 14, and you can even really throw the Knicks in there because they're only a half game behind the Pistons. So everybody, and because it's early in the season, the 7th to the 15th spot, which is basically half of the Eastern Conference, they're only separated by 2.5 games. So there's definitely room for the Pistons to make it up, but you can't watch any of the games they played and think, yeah, this is a team that's definitely, they definitely have that dog in them that's going to help them, that's going to help kind of spring them forward. Let's take a look at some of our comments here. Albert Lewis said the shot the Pistons were taking tonight, it looked like everyone were hands of stone. I'm assuming that means that they were a lot of the shots were missing long and having just kind of long rebounds coming off the rim hard. And I'd agree with that. There were a couple of the Christian Wood threes that weren't even close, so you don't know. But one was like way kind of off the backboard, and then the other one was super, super short. But I mean, it looked like they just had hands of everything that's terrible. Brian Jankowski says, by the way, that wasn't a diss. I enjoy what you have to say about the Lions and Pistons. Add the wings, even if it is monthly. So, Brian, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not the person to talk to. I'm not the person to talk to you guys about the Red Wings. That is definitely not in my wheelhouse. No pun intended there. But I will talk to the higher ups here at Detroit Sports Nation and see if anybody would be interested in doing like a weekly, monthly, kind of just game or a weekly or monthly cap for the Red Wings, because they have way more to say about the Red Wings than I do, and you'll learn way more from them, and you'll just have better conversation with them. Dylan Baer from our Sports Carnage podcast says, and now you got to travel to Chi-Town this weekend. Rough go for you. That's not rough at all. I'm super excited. But if you guys, I guess you wouldn't have known. But on the episode tomorrow, you'll find out, and I'm going to break the news here. But we are going to Chicago as a podcast collective, and then we're taking Don Drysdale from Detroit Sports Nation fame, who, if you guys have even been on Detroit Sports Nation for a day, I'm sure you've read one of Don's articles. We're taking him to Chicago as well. So we'll be there Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're going to the Northwestern and Minnesota football game in Evanston and Northwestern's campus, of course. So very excited for all that, and I'm definitely going to be wearing my Pistons hat. It's a shame that this game couldn't be delayed a couple days so that we could go. But you find out just a little bit more about our trip, you can tune into the Sports Carnage podcast, which should be dropping tomorrow. That's what we lead off with. Albert Lewis says Orlando lost to the Raptors tonight, so they gained no ground. Yeah, everybody in the East is pretty bad, except for like the top 6 teams are doing all right. And the East only has 6 out of their 15 teams that are above 500 right now. So that's really the only silver lining for the Pistons is even though they keep losing these games, they're not losing a ton of ground on the playoff race and on the teams that are ahead of them. Ali Saad said last year we played better. We did play better last year. I think part of it this year is integrating new guys. So guys like Tony Snell, and Bruce Brown played last year, but he's getting definitely a bigger opportunity this year. But and Derrick Rose, of course. It's trying to put those guys in position to where they can gel with the team. The Pistons do have a lot of returning pieces, obviously. Blake, Andre Drummond, Luke Kennard, guys who have been here a couple years now. And then Blake's still trying to work his way back from the injury. I didn't think even if Blake wasn't injured, we'd see him play at the pace he did last year. That was probably his second best season of his career. A lot of people said it was the best, but there was a year in LA where he finished, I think, like 5th in MVP voting. And if you look at his numbers from those years from that year with the Clippers, they're pretty ridiculous. But last year was definitely, top 2 years in his career. So I don't think we were going to get that Blake back. What has set the Pistons back a lot is Reggie Jackson's injury. They're so much better when Reggie's on the court. Even if you don't think of Reggie as like this great player and this plus player for the Pistons, the numbers speak for themselves. The wins speak for themselves. You can look at analytics. You can just look at regular box score numbers, wins and losses and the standings. Whatever you want to look at, the Pistons are without a doubt better offensively and defensively when Reggie Jackson is on the court because he's able to do a lot of things that set the offense in motion. And one of the things that's plagued the Pistons a lot this year, and it looked like it plagued them in the game, but maybe that's just because as you're watching and they don't have a choice, all the mistakes kind of become amplified, is the turnovers. And yeah, the Pistons had 16 again tonight, and it seems like they have 16, 17, 18, 19 every game. And Reggie Jackson is somebody that doesn't turn the ball over a lot. And now when you get the ball into the hands of a guy like Blake, who's had turnover issues this year, Drummond, who's handled the ball more and is thus turning it over more, Luke can be careless with the ball, Langston can be Bruce Brown, Derrick Rose. Now all of those guys have the ball, and they're just turning it over at a higher clip than what Reggie Jackson usually does. Where Toronto coach going? Oh, I think you mean Babcock for the NHL. I don't know. Again, I'm not the hockey guy, but there was if the Detroit Sports Nation Collective is right, and the hockey guys over there, I think some Detroit fans want him back here, but I think they put up a poll earlier. If you haven't voted on it, go vote on it. But I think the consensus was people would rather have Blashill than Babcock. Has anyone here noticed the Pistons in the recent years lack of being shown on national TV? Well, they typically only show good teams on national TV and teams that are going to draw people. So this year, and there was just a tweet about it that you might have seen because it got some pretty good traction going on Twitter and just on social media of like the TNT ratings being down and the NBA ratings being down in general. And part of that is they had these teams scheduled for nationally televised games. And one, we know load management guys are sitting out. But two, they had teams like the Pelicans scheduled. Now there's no Zion. They had the Warriors scheduled, of course. Now there's no Steph. And even now there's no D'Angelo Russell. So you had teams that had these big marquee guys that people wanted to see, and they're just not playing. But nobody's tuning in to see a Pistons game. I think they have 2 nationally televised games all year, and they can always get, I think, flexed at the end of the year on like NBA TV or something like that, in terms of just like the playoff race. But the LeBron James and Dwayne Wade's sons, they play on the same high school team, and ESPN picked up like 15 of their games. So the kids of LeBron and Dwayne Wade have more nationally televised TV games than the Pistons do. It's more than a lot of teams too, but way more than the Pistons and way more than other ones. But nobody wants to see the Pistons on national TV. I would guess that the Pistons don't even get great ratings here because there's not a lot of hype for the team even locally. So nationally, obviously nobody's going to talk about them. If Andre has like a 30-20 game like he had to start the year, then they'll get talked about. They get talked about, probably when Derrick Rose does something. If Blake was playing like he did last year, but even last year, Blake didn't get a ton of national coverage. But they'll probably show you, Derrick Rose getting like a standing ovation in Chicago. You'll definitely see something like that on SportsCenter. But there has been a lack of nationally televised games for the Pistons. It's only sad if you live out of state and don't have like NBA League Pass. But if you live here, it probably doesn't matter unless you don't like Blaha or Kelser, which at that case, you just might not have a soul and you might not be a human being, because even when the Pistons are losing, my man Blaha is out there giving it his all. And I appreciate him. I appreciate him for that. Yeah, it's cool. So it does look like that we don't have a lot of questions here in the Pistons. They kind of spoke for themselves after the way that they played. Again, 8 of 38 in the second half. Crazy how you only make 8 shots in 24 minutes of basketball. But that's what we have for you guys today. If you missed any part of this reaction, you can see it on our YouTube page. It's just Sports Carnage or Sports Carnage Podcast. I'm going to have to look. But if you type in Sports Carnage on YouTube, we'll be the one that's like a red space type of thing. There's also Carnage Sports. I don't know who they are, so forget them. But download our podcast that comes out tomorrow. You can find our link there in the description. If you're watching this on YouTube afterwards, you can find the link in the description below. So make sure you check that out. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Facebook. Our links will be there as well. If you go to this Facebook description right here, you can follow us from there. And if you're on YouTube after, you can just look below, find out all of our other reaction videos. And that's pretty much what we have for you guys tonight. I was worried about this. I am wearing a red shirt. It is not a Bulls shirt. It is a Detroit Motor City type of shirt, but it does have Bulls colors. So maybe I jinxed the Pistons tonight. But we just won't know. And like I said, we'll be back in Chicago. I'll have my trusty Pistons hat with me. And hopefully, we can put up a better showing. Albert Lou says you rarely see the Pistons on ESPN or TNT, but you see a little more of the Pistons on NBA TV, but still not much on national TV. My guess is when the Pistons are on NBA TV, and I'll wrap this up quick, it's because they're playing somebody like the Dallas Mavericks who have Luka Doncic, who people are actually tuning in to see. The Pistons are probably just in the right circumstance because of the opponent that they're facing. But that's what we have for you guys. Good day, good night. If you have work tomorrow, I hope your boss calls you in and you get a raise. If they don't, then you should just quit. But that's what we have. And then if you quit, you have way more time to listen to our podcast, and you can even listen to older podcasts to see everything that we got right and everything that we were fools on. Have a good night. When you passing out free tickets, I gotta get some tickets for myself before I can start giving out free tickets. But oh man, get us some sponsors, and then we'll be able to buy some tickets for you guys. So that's your homework. We'll keep putting out these videos. We'll keep putting out these articles on Detroit Sports Nation. We'll keep podcasting. You guys go out there and get us some sponsorships, and then we can talk about some giveaways. Seems like a fair trade-off to me. Good night, everybody, and thank you for watching.